Well, this week and of course last week, we talked a lot about the relationship of husbands and wives. And if you're not married, you're single, divorced, or separated, you're a widow or a widow. I don't want. Not trying to be insensitive to you and all that, or disregard your needs, because I know that these can be hard things to think about and listen to. But I also think that we never come to a place where we can't keep on learning, and we can't help to be a guide to other people. Because one of the things I find with talking with a lot of young people today is they feel that they don't have many choices when it comes to being mentored, even in the faith, much less in marriage and other relationships. And marriage, I think, is so essential, because I think it's really emblematic of what the Christian life is all about. I think for most Christians, it's where real discipleship begins in their life, because you have to live out your Christian faith in such an immediate and intense way. And it's not just on weekends, it's 24 hours a day. That you have to be seeking to bring your soul, your body into submission to the will of God regarding this other person whom you committed to love and protect and care for and lay your life down till death do you part. So marriage is really, really super challenging. And if you're newly married, or you've been married for a while and you're saying, why is this so hard? The answer is because it's really hard. There's no harder relationship in the world, because most relationships, you can kind of keep them pretty superficial. You get tired of other people, you just, turn off your phone, or you don't answer the doorbell, or you don't respond to the internet. Those things you can kind of close off until you feel like you can deal with them again. But marriage isn't that way. Marriage is something that you're on duty all the time. And I used to give this advice to men back in the days when most of the guys were working and the wives were at home. I know that's not the case anymore, but I used to say to guys, don't get off work until you've been home for at least an hour. And what I meant by that is that when you come home, many times guys just say, man, I've had a long day, I'm tired, I just want to relax, I don't want to be bothered, don't want to have to deal with the kids, don't want to have to deal with any problems. And they come in the front door and the wife immediately has this laundry list of stuff, this happened, that happened, I need this, I need that. And he gets overwhelmed. And I said, if you were working and your boss said, I want you to stay another hour and finish this particular project, you might not be happy about it, but you would do it. And you try to do it with a good attitude. And I'm saying basically you need to do that when you come home. When you come home, you basically have the mindset of not, I'm going to kick my feet back and relax and watch TV and not have to deal with anything. I'm going to come home and I'm going to make the first hour tackling the issues that my wife has had to battle and deal with today, and what the kids had to deal with. So that when you take that time to invest in her, and usually if you have kids that are growing, she's going to want you to spend some time with the kids and take some time with the kids so that she can catch up on all the things that she feels that she's so far behind. I found it really simple that I found I start helping my wife clean the dishes. I start helping my wife vacuum the floor, pick up the house, do all those kinds of things that are part and burden. And especially today when many wives are working and they come home and husbands relax, and the wife still has to work. And then guys wonder, why is she so cranky and irritable? And the answer is she's fatigued, she's tired, and you need to be sensitive to that. And that's where I think that as we look at these passages again, I want to kind of back up, because I jumped ahead to verse 8 yesterday, because I think it's the conclusive statement that really puts everything else he says in verses 1 through 7 into its proper context. But going back to what he said about wives submitting to their husbands, the first thing when he says, submit yourselves, it's a Greek word hupotasso, which is a military term. And it really means basically that you place yourself under the person who is in leadership or who is in authority. In a way, what it comes down to, ladies, is recognizing that God has ordained your husbands to be the head of your home, to be the leader, to both protect and also to provide. And I say that knowing that your husband hopefully is listening, because realizing his primary job is to love you as Christ loved the church, which means he has been willing to lay his life down, not only figuratively, but literally. I found that many times I can lay my life down for my wife by simply helping her to clean up the kitchen or do the dishes or help her to finish dinner or washing the kids while she's doing these other things, and just little things, helping her to make the bed. We got one of these California Kings. This thing's as big as the house, and it's arduous just getting the covers on this thing. And she always asks me, would you help me put the sheets on this bed? It's hard work for me to get those things stretched out. Well, I can't imagine. So if I can do that, well, of course I will. Of course I can. So you just start looking for ways in which you can help to make her load lighter. And what I tell you, it pays off in spades. It comes back, because when she knows that you are caring for her, then trusting your leadership is not nearly as difficult. Now, again, when somebody submits to you, that doesn't mean that they can't talk to you, or they can't correct you, or they can't point something out that you need to be looking at. Because even in the military context, if you have a commander who will not listen to his master sergeants and his corporals and those who are underneath him, when they see something that needs to be seen, that man is probably going to lead them all to their early death or some kind of destructive resent. They need to have somebody who's saying, we're off course, we've missed the objective, we've overlooked this, we've lost this, we need to do that. That's necessary for any leader to be an effective leader. He needs the input. There needs to be information not just flowing downstream. There needs to be information flowing upstream. And that's critical to being effective, so that you never find any great leaders who have been people that wouldn't listen to anybody else. We see a lot of bad ones, people like Adolf Hitler. He was a horrible leader. He didn't listen to anybody. He held his own opinions above and beyond anybody else's, and he led the country right into demise and destruction of unparalleled measures. He's a perfect example of what you do not want to be as a leader who doesn't listen to anybody else except himself, who holds his own opinions too highly. I think we have to recognize, own the fact that we are fallible, that we miss important details, and that sometimes we're just downright wrong. In fact, I think the second phrase where he says that, like Sarah who obeyed Abraham, the first word was hupotasso. This is a hupakuo. And it's interesting. They're related, but it means someone who listens attentively. In other words, Sarah knew that God spoke to Abraham and that God spoke through Abraham, but she also knew he wasn't perfect. And that's why I find it interesting when people say, well, you can go on and says how she called him Lord. They often say, you need to treat your husband like you treat Jesus, calling him Lord. That is not the right use of the terms here. That's the not right application or interpretation. What he's saying is basically she obeyed Abraham because she realized that God had ordained him as a prophet, that he was the head of the family in the house. God spoke to him. God spoke through him. But that doesn't mean that Abraham wasn't fallible. I mean, think about that situation down in Egypt when he kept on telling people, she's my sister, in order to save his own skin, because he didn't have faith to believe that God was greater than Pharaoh. And I think that you got to recognize that he made some bad judgments, even at the same time when she came up with a great idea to take Hagar as a way of getting a surrogate son. And that didn't turn out very well at all. In fact, the Jewish world is still paying for that to this day. So he made some really bad choices, sometimes by not listening to his wife and sometimes by listening to his wife, because what she wanted so badly was something that God wanted to give her by grace, and she convinced him to do it by his own works. Well, but at the same time, think about that moment when God told Abraham to take his son Isaac and offer him up as a burnt offering to the Lord. What do you think was going through Sarah's mind at that point? It's interesting because we're not really given some information. But I can tell you she probably was pretty upset, pretty concerned. I don't know. We'd like to say, oh, yeah, she bought into it and she trusted God. We're not told that. The whole point is that would have been the most horrific thing in the world to imagine. And yet he himself probably questioned himself over 1,000 times. But when push came to shove, God used that to glorify his name and to send a prophetic portrait into the future, that we would understand the struggle that God the Father went with offering up his son on the cross for us. Of course, you know the story. God delivered Isaac at the last moment. God provided a replacement, a lamb that would die in place of Isaac. But the whole idea is that we understand that this obedience to Abraham doesn't mean blind, stupid, and dumb obedience. It means that she shared with him what she said. And as I read the book of Genesis, I see Sarah as being a pretty verbal woman who shared her remarks. But when it comes to the idea that she called him Lord, the idea is the word kurios that we have in the New Testament means that it's the power to make the decision, that ultimately the decision rested with him. And there have been times when my wife and I have been trying to wrestle through a decision. What should we do? And every decision, I really want to know what my wife thinks, because I want her to be happy with it. And I don't want her to say, I told you so afterwards if it goes crazy. So I want to know her opinion. What do you see? What do you think I should do? What do you think the best way to go about this? But at the end, she always says to me, I trust you to make the best decision. We own it together. Whatever the consequences are, we own this together. Because you have to understand that in the decision-making process of life, there are things that you're going to decide to do that even initially and for a period of time may look like that was the worst decision we ever made, not realizing that God used a bad decision in your perspective to bring about a greater result than you could have ever imagined. The key is you're both trying to be obedient to God and faithfully follow him. So we'll pick this up tomorrow. Blessings.